The light in the basement flickered once, twice, then stayed on like an interrogation lamp. "I'm sorry, Linda," the HR rep said, voice as flat as the black coffee in her chipped mug. "Effective immediately, your position is being eliminated." Click, click, click. Her pen tapped against the folder like a countdown. She never looked up. Not once. Not even when I laughed. Across the rust-stained table, William leaned back in his folding chair like he was lounging poolside instead of gutting my future in a moldy HR dungeon beneath the downtown office. His tie was still that ridiculous blue-white sailboats bobbing on polyester waves, the kind of tie worn by men who think they're captains when really they're barnacles on the hull. I'd given him 6 years. 6 years of 12-hour days and sacrifice weekends. The same 6 years that saw my mother's cancer crawl from her lungs to her bones. I paid her hospital bills while he played shuffle the PowerPoint with his golf buddies. Now he smirked like he'd just let one rip and blamed it on the dog. 1 week before bonuses. 7 days before I would have cleared 40 grand. Money already promised to my mother's collapsing roof and a stack of medical bills high enough to block sunlight. But William was restructuring. His version of spring cleaning. Fire anyone whose paycheck made him feel insecure. I stood slowly. Every movement calibrated. My molars grinding so hard I tasted copper. "No severance?" I asked, voice wrapped in silk but sharp underneath. "You'll receive the standard package," chirped HR, still pen tapping like a woodpecker on Xanax. 3 weeks. Positive reference. Assuming no complications. "Oh, don't worry," I said, slinging my bag over my shoulder. My fingers were shaking. "I wouldn't dream of interrupting your little bonus bloodbath." I walked out. No tears. No tremble. Just a long corridor of coworkers who suddenly found their keyboards fascinating. Even Sandra, who once cried in my office over her divorce, wouldn't meet my eyes. My desk sat at the end like a waiting coffin. I packed fast. A photo of Mom from before the chemo. 3 mugs, sarcasm, regret, and caffeine stains. 12 sticky notes full of obsolete passwords and broken promises. It felt like cleaning out a crime scene. Like someone else had lived this life and I was just the body disposal crew. The elevator groaned as it descended. A steel tomb lowering me into professional purgatory. I didn't cry until later, when I was 2 glasses into a lukewarm box of wine, face pressed into a microwave burrito, mascara smudged like war paint. That's when I remembered. The drawer. Bottom left. The one I never touched unless the printer was jammed, or I needed a stress ball to keep from screaming. I dug through it, mind half-fogged, and there it was. Wedged between an old ergonomic mouse and a squashed rubber mascot. My original contract. Still in its envelope. Still signed. I opened it slowly like disarming a bomb. And there, buried in the dry desert of legalese on page 6, section 12b, hiding under a clause about termination conditions, was my resurrection. If employee is terminated without cause, she shall be entitled to 10% of company net quarterly profit in the quarter of termination, in lieu of standard bonus and severance. I read it. Then read it again. 10%. Not of my team's bonus. Not my salary. The company's entire net quarterly profit. I laughed so hard I snorted wine out my nose and nearly choked on a refried bean. Because here's the thing. They thought they were cutting dead weight. But I wrote that clause back in 2016, back when this company still had a conscience. Back when I was the one who landed them the billion-dollar safety contract that saved them from bankruptcy. They let me write my own terms. And William? William never read them. Of course he didn't. He doesn't read anything that doesn't come with croutons or cleavage. But I did. And now? Now I'm going to make him bleed for every dollar. They thought they were done with me. But I had the contract. I had the clause. And it didn't say, "You owe me a pat on the head and 3 weeks of pity pay." It said 7 figures. Not a typo. Not a bonus. Not even a bribe. A full 10% of the company's quarterly net profit. And if they wanted to bury me, I'd come back with a shovel and dig up their whole rotten foundation. Monday, 8:03 a.m. The hallway smelled like scorched toner and something decomposing under a legal pad. Perfect place to plot a war. Charles's law office sat wedged between a boarded-up pawn shop and a dive bar with bloodstains on the sidewalk. Yelp had called him the legal equivalent of a pit bull with rabies. Exactly the energy I needed. He didn't bother with small talk. Just jabbed a nicotine-stained finger at the chair across from his desk, a collapsing slab of wood buried beneath folders, crumpled posts, and what I swear was a rusted switchblade. He skimmed the contract without blinking. Not once. So, he muttered, flipping pages like they'd insulted his mother. They cut you loose a week before bonus season. Corporate restructuring, I said, air quoting so hard my knuckles popped. Charles gave a low whistle. Not the sympathetic kind, the kind you hear right before someone slaps down a royal flush. This clause, he jabbed it with a cracked pen, is titanium. Crystal clear. 10% of net profit, quarter of termination. Executable. Aggressively enforceable. He looked up, eyes sharp as broken glass. They're screwed. My lungs remembered how to breathe. But, he added, leaning back, here came the hammer. They'll never admit it was without cause. That'd be suicide. I nodded slowly. They'll say I was toxic. Unprofessional. Maybe didn't support the vision. Exactly. They'll manufacture a record. Paper trail their lies. Retroactive performance warnings. A couple carefully worded HR emails. Hell, they might even Photoshop your Slack messages. I clenched my fists in my lap, nails digging into skin. The rage had cooled into something harder, meaner. So what do? We go hunting, he said, voice low. You build your own paper trail. Pull everything. Praise from executives, successful projects, performance awards. Anything that says, this woman was a machine. Make it impossible to claim otherwise. And the motive? Charles leaned forward. Money. They canned you to inflate their bonus pool. This wasn't random. It's a pattern. Find others. Anyone let go just before the payout. That's your leverage. I stood slowly, heart pounding in a cold, even rhythm. I wasn't out for revenge anymore. I was out for blood with a briefcase. Tuesday, 7:19 p.m. Rain slid down the windows of the tie joint like oil on glass. The kind of place where secrets settled into the upholstery. Emily was already there, tucked into the back booth, face half-lit by flickering neon and fury. Her hands were wrapped around a sweating water glass like it was a throat she was trying not to squeeze. She didn't wait for pleasantries. They told us you left. Voluntarily. I raised an eyebrow. Voluntarily? Right before bonuses. Did they say I skipped off to open an alpaca farm too? Nobody bought it. Her voice dropped. William moved into your office the next day. Painted the walls. Put up one of those inspirational quote posters. You know the kind, leaders eat last. While he's chewing through people's livelihoods. I slid into the booth, the air thick with lemongrass and bitterness. He thinks this is over, I said. Thinks I'll vanish quietly. Slap up a cheery LinkedIn post and go cry into a self-care app. Emily's jaw tightened. You're not. I met her eyes. Not even close. She exhaled. Good. Because I have things you need to see. A pause. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You weren't the only one they buried. Emily exhaled like she'd been holding her fury in a vault. Good, she said, voice tight. Because I've got something. William's been strutting through the office like a Game of Thrones villain. Talking about how lean and mean the exec team will look on the quarterly report. Boasting about how much fat he cut before Q3 earnings go to the board. I tilted my head, jaw twitching. That fat being me? You. 2 PMs. Someone in HR. Stephen from compliance. My brows lifted. Stephen? The man who color-coded his inbox and once apologized to the fax machine. Yeah, they gutted him. No warning. Just a handshake and a manila envelope full of broken dreams. I leaned back in the booth, the worn vinyl groaning beneath me. So they weren't restructuring. They were sanitizing the payroll. Not just sanitizing, Emily said, voice a notch lower. They were bleaching the books. I didn't respond. My silence said enough. But then she hesitated just a beat too long. And I knew the real bomb hadn't dropped yet. There's more, she said, scanning the restaurant like the soy sauce packets were wired for sound. You remember the 40s deal? I blinked. The RFP that ate 3 weeks of my life? The one that turned my diet into dry shampoo and rage. She nodded. We landed it. I sat up straighter. That deal closed. Yep. Signed. Sealed. Quietly buried in a shared drive so no one outside the C-suite would see it. Why bury a win? Because it hasn't been announced yet. But William's already counting it in Q3 projections. The margin on it? It's grotesque. The CFO nearly passed out on the earnings call. They're calling it a turning point. My stomach flipped. You're telling me they cut me the day before the deal closed? The day after, technically. My jaw locked. Acid crawled up my throat. So they waited. Waited until I'd secured their golden goose. Then they axed me, lowballed the headcount, inflated earnings, and carved up the carcass for bonuses. Emily's expression hardened. You weren't a problem. You were an expensive line item. A rounding error they could erase. I looked down into my water glass. Its surface reflected nothing human, just numbers, columns, decimals, and beneath them, a smear of blood. You can get me proof? I asked. She nodded. Carefully. I'll forward what I can from my personal account. Meeting notes. Slack threads. Screenshots of William bragging like he's already halfway to St. Tropez. Be careful. She smiled, wolfish, wicked. Please. I've survived 3 layoffs, 2 embezzlement cover-ups, and a trust fall with William. I know how to sneak. We paid in cash. Left 10 minutes apart. The cold air hit me like a slap. But for the first time in days, my breath didn't hitch. My hands didn't shake as I dialed Charles. It's go time, I said. The letter went out within the hour. Certified. Ice cold. Just 1 paragraph, tight as a snare. Per Section 12B of Ms. Laurie's employment contract, we are formally requesting the payment of 10% of your company's net quarterly profit due to her termination without cause. A bomb in a business envelope. William had no idea the pin was already pulled. 3 days later, the response came wrapped in smugness, printed on cream paper thick enough to double as body armor. Grayson, Felder and Whitcomb LLP. The kind of firm that charges $800 an hour just to breathe in your general direction. Charles read the letter aloud in his office while I paced like a storm on legs. Ms. Laurie's employment was terminated for cause in accordance with company policy and supported by a documented history of performance concerns. I stopped mid-stride. Keep going. He did, tone dry as bone. Repeated insubordination. A pattern of unprofessional conduct. Failure to meet strategic objectives. He slid the attachments toward me. 3 written warnings. 2 PPs. 1 final performance review. All signed by William. I stared at the stack. My fingertips buzzed as I flipped the first page. June 14th. Claimed I disrupted a team meeting. Called William's strategy rudderless. Publicly undermined his leadership. I snorted. That was the day I brought donuts because we hit our milestones 2 weeks early. I still have the receipt, I muttered. Charles leaned back in his chair, eyes steady behind wire-rimmed glasses. They're faking a paper trail. Classic defense. But the timing's off. No documentation at the time, no prior knowledge on your end, and no witnesses who'll back it. I let the lie fester in my hands. A stack of forged failure. My signature forged. My reputation rewritten in real time. But that wasn't fear I felt rising. It was precision. If they want to play fiction, I said, then I'll publish the truth. Charles nodded slowly. Time to make some noise. I stared at the forged papers like they'd crawled out of a sewer. 3 fake warnings. 2 bogus PIPs. 1 final nail, all signed in William's smug, looping scrawl. But not one of them carried my signature. Not a single one. Charles tapped the corner of the stack with his pen like it was a murder weapon. This is their move. Paint you as poison. If they prove it was for cause, that clause you're hanging on to. He made a slicing motion. Dead. Blacklisted. Broke. Branded a problem, I murmured. Perfect corporate ending. Charles didn't blink. They're playing chess. No, I said, jaw tightening. They're forging official documents. That's not chess. That's criminal. Then prove it. The words dropped like a gavel. Hard. Final. Cold. Not cruel, just honest. A punch of truth between the ribs. I could scream it all day, tattoo it on my forehead, but without evidence I was just another bitter ex-employee crying wolf in a legal minefield. Then something surfaced. Dumb. Petty. Crucial. William never wrote reviews, I said slowly. Charles raised an eyebrow. He didn't know how. He'd send the template to his admin with some condescending note like, make it sound visionary. You think he used his computer? If he typed even one sentence of these, I said, already thumbing open my phone, it left digital fingerprints. I fired off a message to Emily. Short. Sharp. I need originals. Word docs. Not PDFs. From the shared drive or his laptop. Because those files? They weren't just lies. They were timestamps. Buried clocks waiting to betray him. If she can get them, Charles said, grinning now, and the files are created after your firing date. We've got them by the throat. My blood settled into a low boil. Calm on the surface. Lethal underneath. They thought they buried me. They forgot who dug the graves. 12:06 a.m. Phone buzzed. One message. 4 words. GODM. You're gonna love this. Emily. I sat bolt upright, wine spritzer forgotten, laptop cracking open like a weapon case. 4 Word docs attached. Not PDFs, originals. She found them in a folder William labeled exec private 1, like slapping a fake mustache on a wanted poster. Apparently, the man who couldn't unmute himself on Zoom thought adding a number to a file path made it untraceable. I opened the first file. Held my breath. Date created, October 4th, 10:14 a.m. I was fired October 3rd. They forged every document after I was out the door. I laughed aloud, ugly triumphant. The sound of vindication in a cracked laugh track. Charles called 3 minutes later. You've got your bullet, he said, breathless. This isn't just leverage. This is a nuclear option. They can't walk this into court. I barely heard him. I was already opening Emily's second message. Another file. This one a spreadsheet. Q3 preliminary earnings, internal use only. Every major contract. Revenue lines. Closed deals. And there it was buried near the bottom. The 40s deal. My deal. Profit, $38.6 million. I did the math. 10% equals $3.86 million. My lungs froze. That wasn't a bonus. That was absolution. That was my mother's chemo, paid in full. That was every sleepless weekend, every unpaid overtime hour, every fake smile in every meeting where William butchered the word collaboration. I didn't feel joy. Or relief. Not yet. What I felt was clarity. They could have paid me clean and walked away. They chose deception. They chose war. They didn't just lie. They lied badly. They didn't just hand me a rope. They tied the noose, looped it neatly, and walked it straight into my hands. This wasn't about reclaiming dignity anymore. That ship sailed the moment I caught them forging history on company letterhead. No, this was about legacy. About consequences. About making sure the next exec who thought about trimming fat before bonus season paused long enough to see my shadow in the boardroom walls. I told Charles to pause the legal letters. Not yet, I said. He raised an eyebrow. What's the play? We set the table, I murmured. We let them think we're bluffing. Let them feel safe. Then I smiled, a small sharp thing. Then we flipped the whole damn table. No more defense. I was building a trap, and I was nearly done laying bait. 2 days later, the envelope arrived like a nervous confession, hand-delivered by a courier who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. That kind of expression only shows up when someone knows they're the mule for bad news. Inside, 5 pages of legal fluff dressed up like a Christmas card. A one-time Goodwill payout of $150,000. Their idea of closure. Hush money dressed in Sunday best. No apology. No responsibility. Just a sterile line about mutual interest in avoiding prolonged proceedings. Charles skimmed it, then barked a quiet laugh. They're sweating. This isn't an offer. It's bait. They know we've got something, they just don't know how deep the knife goes. Good, I said. Let's keep it that way. Then the universe cracked open one more door. Subject, heard what happened. The sender, Bradley. Finance. Quiet. Lived in spreadsheets. The kind of guy who spoke in cell references and whose idea of confrontation was sighing loudly when someone reordered printer toner incorrectly. But the email? Wasn't quiet. Heard what happened. I've got something. I was let go after raising questions about Q3 entries. They're hiding something. Let me know if you're willing to talk. We met at a highway diner, cracked booths, weak coffee, and a waitress who called me sweetheart before I even sat down. Bradley looked like he hadn't slept in days. They cut me 3 days after I flagged the 40s deal, he said, voice low, fingers drumming his mug like they were still tapping formulas into Excel. Revenue wasn't supposed to hit Q3. It was deferred income. But the CFO pushed to pull it forward. Boost the quarter. Pat the pool. He stared into the coffee like it might show him absolution. I escalated. Quietly. Got stonewalled. Next thing I know, I'm called into HR for a confidential concern review. 2 days later, I'm out. He made the air quotes like he meant to cut someone with them. Restructuring. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a flash drive like it was a holy relic. Original files. Projections before the revisions. I backed them up before they shut down my access. I took it like it was ticking. This wasn't just intel. This was a second match. Someone else burned. Someone else silenced. That night, I sent Charles everything. The files. The metadata. The numbers. He called within minutes. I could hear the storm in his voice. This changes everything. This isn't a lawsuit anymore. This is exposure. SEC level. Fraud, falsified reports, coordinated retaliation. If this goes public. I didn't let him finish. The CEO won't let it go public. Not over William. Then we corner them, he said, pulse rising. I nodded, already pacing. We don't go back and forth. No drawn-out bleeding. I stopped. We go for the throat. The plan, one room. No slow burn. No legal chess match. Just one meeting. Us. William. The CEO. The company's legal team. A table. A flash drive. And a clock ticking toward ruin. Charles called it a negotiation. I called it the slaughterhouse. Because we weren't coming to plead. We weren't coming to settle. We were coming to collect. The conference room felt more like a morgue than a meeting space, quiet, clinical, and cold enough to leach warmth from your bones. The kind of room where careers flatline under polished glass and executive smiles. A long, gleaming table stretched between us like a surgical tray. Bottled waters lined up like ammunition. Leather chairs too soft for the hard conversation ahead. I sat facing William. He couldn't quite meet my gaze. Instead, he busied himself with the buttons on his cuff, straightened his watch, tapped his phone screen like it held an escape plan he hadn't found yet. That expensive blazer he loved? It suddenly looked like armor on a man going to war without a weapon. To his right sat Bobby, the CEO. Stone-faced. Tailored within an inch of inhuman. A man who didn't need to raise his voice. He could freeze your future with a single glance. Charles was to my left. Relaxed. Collected. Dressed like he'd just walked out of a lunch meeting, not a corporate firing squad. Sleeves rolled. Legal pad open. Pages of carefully loaded truth resting beneath his hand like a hammer. He slid a flash drive across the table. Let's begin, he said. Tiffany, the company's lawyer, a woman whose vibe screamed, I've buried worse than this before lunch, slotted it into her laptop. The monitor behind her flared to life. First order of business, Charles said, his voice smooth as ice. Performance documentation. He didn't need to look up to rattle it off. 3 written warnings. 1 performance plan. 1 final review. All used to justify a for-cause termination. All allegedly written and submitted before Ms. Laurie's exit on October 3rd. William shifted, the faintest smirk curling his lips like a reflex. They were accurate, he said. She was combative. Constantly undermined leadership. Ask anyone who worked with her. Charles held up a hand. We're not here for office gossip. Click. A metadata window appeared on the screen. Date created, October 4th, 10:14 a.m. Charles's eyes flicked toward William. My client was fired the day before that file even existed. Click. October 4th, 10:19. Click. October 4th, 10:27. Click. October 4th, 10:36. 5 documents. All written the morning after I was fired. All forged. All backdated. Silence dropped like a curtain. Tiffany shifted in her seat. Bobby didn't flinch. But his gaze sharpened, cold calculation behind steel gray eyes. William? His skin was going gray. Palms twitching. Mouth dry. Charles calmly moved to the next tab. Next, a sworn statement from Bradley, former finance analyst. Let go shortly after questioning Q3 accounting practices. Bobby blinked once. Barely. Attached are unrevised earnings projections and emails from your CFO ordering those figures be realigned specifically to pull revenue from Q4 into Q3. Charles flipped a page. That bump, artificially inflating quarterly profit, coincided precisely with bonus calculations. And Ms. Laurie's termination. He leaned back, eyes locked on Bobby. To recap. My client closed a deal that added millions to your quarterly numbers. She was fired right after. You faked documents to justify the firing. then terminated another employee for exposing the accounting behind it. All of which is now archived, verified, and if needed, actionable. He let that hang in the air like a guillotine waiting to drop. Tiffany looked ready to argue, but didn't. William looked ready to vanish. Bobby stared at the screen. Then, slowly he turned to William. "You said this was resolved." William's voice barely held. I thought it was internal and I didn't expect." "Leave." "What?" Bobby didn't repeat himself. "Get out of this room. Now." William stood so fast he knocked his chair into the wall. He didn't pick it up. Just bolted. No one stopped him. The silence he left behind was somehow louder than any shouting. Bobby turned to me. "Miss Laurie," he said, tone as flat as frost. "May I speak with you in private?" Charles gave me a quiet glance. I gave a slow nod. Tiffany looked like she might object, but Bobby cut her off with a flick of his hand. "Just us." The room emptied like a dying tide. And then there were two. Just me and the man who controlled the company's pulse. No distractions. No allies. Just predator across from predator. The war was done. Now we were here to settle the cost of silence. Bobby waited until the latch clicked and the room settled into silence. He didn't offer pleasantries. No performance of empathy. No attempt to smooth the edges. Just strategy wrapped in skin. "You didn't come here to make noise," he said. "You came for your cut." I studied him, then gave a small nod. "That's right." He slid a slim folder toward me, precise, minimalist, and terrifying in its finality. 10% of projected Q3 profit, he said. Subject to minor audit adjustments. Funds wired within 72 hours of signing. Charles opened the folder. Read it faster than I could blink. His face didn't change. Which meant it was real. Non-disclosure. I asked. He nodded. Absolute silence, he said. No interviews. No whispers. No future conversations. "And William?" I asked, my tone flat, fingers drumming a slow beat on the table. "Terminated. Today. Cited for misconduct and policy violations. No dramatics. No dignity. Just a quiet erasure." I didn't grin. I didn't smirk. But the cold in my chest finally cracked. It wasn't revenge. It was balance. Still, I tapped the folder again. "I want two things before I sign." Bobby didn't even hesitate. "Say them." "One, Bradley. You'll pay him $250,000. Listed as external consulting. No taxes, no heat." His jaw flexed. "Agreed." 2, Emily gets a letter of reference. Not vague, not formulaic. Glowing. "And signed by you. You're cleaning up on the way out," he said, voice devoid of emotion. "No," I said. "I'm leaving the place better than I found it." Charles stifled a laugh with a cough. Bobby stood and straightened his cuffs. "You'll have the final papers by morning. We expect your signature by noon." I rose as well. 3 days, I said. He nodded. 3 days. We shook hands. His grip was professional, firm, like he was closing a deal on damaged goods and didn't want to touch them any longer than necessary. Charles and I walked out together, quiet, like two people exiting a courtroom after a verdict they'd known was coming. Because we weren't just leaving the building. We were leaving the burial site. William's career wasn't ending in scandal. It was dissolving into a sealed document in the quiet sound of no one speaking his name again. The transfer came through at 9:07 a.m. on a Tuesday. 7 figures. Clear. Clean. Final. My banking app lagged, like it needed time to compute what just happened. I didn't cry. I logged into the hospital system. Cleared Mom's balance with one transaction. Then the mortgage. Gone. Credit cards. Loans. Those bottom feeder payday traps I'd used during her worst months? All gone. Like scrubbing blood from tile. It didn't feel real until I called her. She answered quickly. "Tell me you didn't rob someone," she said. "Nope. I outplayed a machine." She laughed. "Took long enough to figure out you were the one holding the matches." Bradley's check went out that afternoon. When I told him, he choked up. Couldn't speak for a moment. Said no one had ever gone to bat for him before. I told him he'd earned every cent. Then reminded him to get a better mattress and a laptop that didn't sound like a dying blender. Emily got her letter on Thursday. Bobby didn't push back. He knew when to stop bleeding. She met me at the same Thai place. Same booth. Her eyes were glassy, hands trembling around a fresh job offer. "They called me indispensable," she whispered. "You are," I said. "Just don't correct your boss until your second promotion." We laughed. We should have left it there. But some stories don't end in silence. Some stories ask to be told. And this one? This one wasn't finished yet. I had one more card to play. Quiet Thursday. No drama. Just a bottle of champagne worth more than the rusted Civic I drove through college and a blinking cursor on a job review site. No rage. No names. No legal landmines. Just the truth, polished and sharp. Beware of sudden restructuring that coincides with bonus season. Here, loyalty is disposable. Success is punished. Leadership doesn't just tolerate creative accounting, they sharpen it like a knife. If you see smoke, assume fire. No accusations. Just breadcrumbs. Anyone with a LinkedIn account and a memory knew exactly who it was about. Within days, it caught fire. Former employees messaged me like war veterans recognizing the same battlefield. Recruiters reached out, asking if I consulted on corporate toxicity cleanup. I told them I was unavailable. Because I was. I was sitting on the deck of a beach house I now own, paid in full. No mortgage. No neighbors. Just wind, salt air, and the kind of silence that feels like healing. Mom was on speaker, her voice crisp against the sound of gulls dive-bombing a bag of chips. "What are you drinking?" she asked. "Champagne. The cheap stuff or the kind that doesn't come in a plastic flute?" I smiled, watching the bubbles rise like they had somewhere better to be. "The real kind," I said. "No regrets. No heartburn." She laughed. "What's the celebration?" I tilted the glass toward the ocean. "I beat the machine," I said. "Used their rules. Turned their fine print into a chokehold. And then I raised the glass. To every late night. Every skipped lunch. Every smile I forced through clenched teeth. To the years they took and the reckoning they bought. Because some bridges are meant to burn. And some exits deserve a sky full of fireworks. You made it to the end, survivor. To everyone grinding in glass towers and pretending not to bleed. This toast is for you. Smash that subscribe button or the coffee machine gets it. See you at the next fire.